is when you look at the Gospels, when you look at the New Testament books, and you look at that information, what words that Jesus spoke impressed you that he was telling the truth, or do you think that he was telling the truth when he claimed to be God? Or was he even claiming to be God?
Well, in some ways, the indirect evidence of Jesus being more than a mere mortal is more compelling than the direct evidence. Let me give you an example. The word amen, which we still use today, we use as a confirmation of when some other person has said something that we believe is true, and we will say, so be it, which is what amen means. I agree. Yes, that's true. Now, in the case of Jesus, one of the things that is distinctive of the Jesus tradition is that Jesus used the word amen before he said some particular important utterance. Amen, I say to you. We translate it truly. Truly, I say to you. Now, in advance of his saying it, he affirms the truthfulness of his words. What other early Jew did that? Nobody. We don't find it anywhere else in the New Testament. Peter doesn't do this of his utterances. Paul doesn't do this of his utterances. Other early Jews that we have record of didn't do this of their own utterances. To the contrary, most early Jews were using footnotes. I say on the authority of Rabbi Shammai, who says on the authority of Rabbi Hillel, so-and-so. This is true. Well, Jesus affirmed the truthfulness of his own words in advance by saying, amen. I mean, what kind of person does that in a Jewish culture highly dependent on tradition? A very unusual person. Another piece of evidence, Jesus himself says, I say unto you. I mean, he speaks on his own authority. This is one of the things that the Gospels convey over and over again. In one of the earliest stories about Jesus being in the synagogue in the Gospel of Mark, if you look at Mark 1 and 2, it says, a new teaching and with authority. He doesn't use footnotes. He speaks on his own authority. In a highly tradition-bound culture, what kind of person says, you've heard it said in the tradition of the elders, but I say to you, on my own authority? What kind of person does that? What kind of person says, I say? Furthermore, what kind of person treats the Mosaic law with the kind of sovereign freedom Jesus did? Jesus says the dominion of God is breaking into human history. That means new occasions teach new duties. Guess what? The laws of clean and unclean no longer should restrict us from reaching out to people who have leprosy or have this disease or that disease, Jesus allows his disciples to do things that the Pharisees and others would have said were acts of ritual uncleanness. Jesus says, this is a new situation. The eschatological age is broken in. I'm telling you now that those laws are now obsolescent. Now, what kind of person feels that they have the freedom to set aside some of the Mosaic law? I mean, these kind of indirect evidences are to me some of the most compelling pieces of evidence because they're not the kinds of things that later Christians wanted to claim about Jesus. They wanted to go with the titles. He's Son of God, he's Son of Man, this is who he is. And certainly Jesus did make some claims of that sort. It seems very clear that he went around calling himself Son of Man quite a lot. But
Was that important?
Well, I think it's very important.
How come? What is Son of Man for you in terms of deity?
Well, first of all, the context of that phrase is Daniel 7. It's not a general Ben Adam, son of Adam kind of phrase. It doesn't mean a human being like me. If you look at the context out of which Jesus is using that phrase in Daniel 7, the Son of Man figure is the one who comes before the Almighty and is given an everlasting kingdom. Now, what kind of person can rule in an everlasting kingdom? It's only an everlasting person who can rule forever and ever and ever. So the proper context in which to exegete this phrase, Son of Man, is Daniel 7:13 and following. That's where this phrase comes from. Now, what's interesting about that is that Jesus didn't want to be pigeonholed. There were a wide panoply of messianic expectations in early Judaism. Jesus didn't want to be pigeonholed into, well, he's going to be a political Messiah, bringing a warrior group of persons to Jerusalem, and he's going to take over by violence. He didn't want to be pigeonholed in this way or that way. He wanted to define his own identity in a way that he felt was natural and would best represent who he was. So he chose to refer to himself over and over again as Son of Man. If you knew the later prophetic scriptures like Daniel and Zechariah, you would understand the eschatological and apocalyptic overtones of that. If you didn't, it would just sound like he was claiming to be a representative